All right. Welcome to the Hope Youth Podcast. I'm so glad that you're listening today. Our podcast is a place where we talk about life, we talk about being a youth, and we talk about how God works in our lives. Today, I've got an incredible guest, Doug Reynolds, with us. Some of you youth may remember him from Mexico last year. He came and drove bus and drove us to the hospital and was in for one of the craziest Mexico trips probably of his life, definitely mine. And so thank you so much, Doug, for coming, hanging out today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That was kind of a crazy trip. We had to drive people to the hospital before, but that time I was first time for me to get real sick there.
Yeah, that was something else. I remember when there was one healthy-ish bus driver, and you and I were both pretty out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So I invited you to come on the show today because not only do you have some connection with our youth group already from your time with us going to Mexico, but also you have some life experiences I think are really cool to hear about, and you have some perspective that often we don't get of the big picture of how God works in tough places in life. But before we dig in too much, I just want to ask you, how did you get involved at Hope Community Church?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, Hope Community Church was one of the churches thought I would explore when Jan, my wife, was up at our cabin in the summer because I was looking at wanting to get somewhere to find a church closer to home. And so I thought I'd sneak into the back of the church on a Sunday. And it was at that time, it was in the school. So I kind of snuck in the back row. And the first opening worship song was just playing. And it had just started. And Stu Gerber was leading it. And then he stopped because he had seen me. And he just kind of, it was someone I had been on a mission trip to Mexico with years before. And he stopped and he just kind of looks out and he goes, "Is that Doug? Is that Doug?" Which was like, oh, crazy. I got, all these heads turned around and looked at me, and it was like so much for sneaking into a church.
Welcome to Hope.
Yeah, welcome to home.
That's one of the things I love about Hope. There is no hiding.
No, no hiding at all.
You show up in Stu or Sid or somebody's just gonna be like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very welcoming church. So been really thankful about that for sure.
That's awesome. Well, I'd love for you to just share kind of like the 5-minute version of your life story from when and where you were born to how you ended up where you're at now, what you're doing with your life. And sadly, you said that you can't share some of your stories from your teenage years because they might not be the best role model. It
No,
might be giving some bad ideas, but skimming over that part. Yeah.
yeah, well, skip over that part. I guess I was born and raised in Kamloops, BC, which is a smaller place, and I moved down here when I was going into grade 10. So my real formative years were in a much smaller community where there was a lot more freedom. So my parents really didn't have to keep an eye on us too much because they assumed everything was safe out there, But from a young age, we started getting into some things that we shouldn't have got into, and including at a young age, alcohol, which is one of the things we'd be talking about. But, grew up with one set of grandparents who we didn't get to see much. And I guess that's about it. And when I was always looking for a job to figure out a way to make money, which was always good to have pocket cash because my family didn't have money.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I have had myself a job that I found since I was in kindergarten. At least
Okay, what's your job history? I just would love to hear.
Really, yeah, really. Like I started working for the janitor at the elementary school when I was in kindergarten. I'd be the kid that'd be vacuuming the brushes for him or go, I could actually leave the school and go buy him his lunch at the corner store. We had much more freedom. So I'd make a little bit of money off every day. Then I got a paper route in my brother's name because I was too young to have a paper route. So it was in his name, but it was my paper route. And then I started working in drive-in theaters, and I worked at the P&E. I worked, and then I worked at a grocery store, and then got into the lumber industry when I was, So I almost felt like that apprenticeship of Goody Kravitz, which no one will know, where the guy really was a money-hungry kind of little guy, right?
Hmm.
That was sort of how I was, so I would have pocket cash for things. Worked out good. And then in the end, I was able to buy a home when I was really young because of that.
That's awesome. And you started like the first years of your life were in Kamloops, and when did you move to the Lower Mainland?
When I was just going into grade 10, the summer between grade 9 and 10, so that was in the early 70s,
Okay.
a lifetime ago. I'm a senior.
Yeah, where did you move into in the Lower
Moved into
Mainland?
Burnaby.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a good, fair enough place to go grow up in, but like Burnaby North High School was like a factory compared to anything around where I was. In my old house, I just climbed, like living in Kamloops,
Hmm.
walked down to the end of our half-acre lot, climbed the fence, and I was in the school parking lot.
Oh, wow. That's
So
crazy.
yeah, so it was a little different.
How did you feel about the move as a high schooler? Was it like fun? Was it
You know,
stressful?
it was actually, that was a really tough time in teenage years, because actually when I went to the junior high school I went to in Kamloops was very, you'd think of these smaller cities might be easier, but it was a very tough um, high school,
Hmm.
junior high school. A lot of people, we had a lot of the native kids were bussed in, and we had a
Hmm.
lot of the other outlying communities were bussed in. So it was always a very dangerous fights and
There's just a lot of tension between different groups.
huge tension with lots of major
Huh.
fighting going on.
Wow.
Some of them were racially involved, some of them weren't, but it was always, you always felt unsafe, always
Hmm.
looking over your shoulder. So when I moved to Vancouver, even though it was the big city kind of thing, it felt safer at school. And as soon as someone tried to start anything,
Yeah.
I just not having it. So it was like put the large guy down fast and then move on. And then
Wow.
things were safe. Felt good.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's a different shift than a lot of people's experience. That's cool to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, and so you graduated high school. You eventually got into lumber business.
Yeah.
When did you meet your wife?
Yeah, that was a godsend.
Okay.
Definitely, that's a story too, because I think, like I say, my personality wasn't the best, and we should have talked about this maybe before, but
We'll
this is
dig into that.
this
So we'll
is a
dig
bit
into it.
humorous. This is a bit
Okay.
humorous. Okay. Um, buddy of mine in Kamloops, so I used to get in lots of trouble with, came down here. Um, and anyway, he was visiting me for the weekend. He says, "Hey, this girl who just moved down from Kamloops just now, and I'd like to go see her." And Jan was working in a coffee shop on Robson Street, so we went down, and he starts talking to her, and I say hi, and then I'm looking at, I don't know, Princess Di mugs, whatever is on the shelves of this Murchie's tea and coffee, just to sort of politely. I'm listening to him, and I'm thinking, she sounds like a really nice girl. He's talking to this girl, and I think, she's a really nice girl. And so later I thought, when we were back at my place, I say, hey, can you give me her phone number? And he says, no way. Because he's thinking like, she's way too good for you.
Hmm.
And so back then, they used to have the phone that was mounted on the wall. You have to take the phone off the wall and you would dial it. It was actually dial.
Yeah.
So he's in my kitchen and I'm looking over his shoulder. And yes, that's how I got Jan's phone number. And eventually, after calling and talking to her for a long time, she agreed to go out with me. And we had a 1 year from the date we met to the date we got married.
Oh, wow. That's
So
incredible.
yeah, it was just like, I knew this girl was for me. And yeah, it was definitely. I was a good enough kid, but I was always straddling on the fence of being. I could be much worse than I was, and
Yeah.
maybe Jan was the first thing that really kept me more on a straight path, I think, than
That's awesome. You
starting to put it up.
stole the number watching
I
over your
stole the
shoulder.
number. Yeah.
That's
Sort of
great.
like stalked her.
Yeah, just slightly stalker, but she fell for you, so it's all good. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the themes that I really wanted to dig into today, when you came to us with us on the trip to Mexico, you shared about how God worked in your life so much in Mexico and a bit of your testimony, which is really
Mm-hmm.
incredible to hear and impact us a fair bit. But I just wanted to hear some, like, kind of do a longer form and hear more of your story around alcohol and how that came to be a factor in your life, how that played out, what that's like now. And yeah, kind of some of what you can share with us is we're looking at the reality of growing up. When you become a youth, you start to have the option to consider drugs and alcohol and different
Mhm.
addictive
Yeah.
habits. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure at what age people, like if I was unusual or not, when we first started experimenting with alcohol and probably, started stealing a little bit from the parents kind of at some age is what I did. And then
Hmm.
by the time I was 16, I was drinking on a fairly regular basis whenever I could get somebody to get some for me because I didn't look like one of those teenagers who grow a beard and a mustache at a young age. So I had to get somebody else to
Yeah.
sneak it for me or buy it for me. But yeah, I got involved at a fairly young age
Hmm.
with the drinking, but it wasn't, it wasn't one of those things that forced. I still was able to graduate from high school and I started going to university. I never completed university, but I didn't have a need to
Hmm.
at that point. But so it wasn't affecting my life that I wasn't functioning, and I was,
Yeah.
but it got to me in a much, it's that slippery slope.
Hmm. So, like, what were you thinking about it? Like, when you were in high school, starting to drink with your friends and university, was it something that you were just
Mhm.
like, it's just kind of what I do? And, or were you like, do you have any thoughts about maybe this might be a bad thing for me?
Well, no, it's by the time you reach university and everyone's drinking,
Yeah.
it's not a thing. And it's when you're younger, it seems like this is a cool thing to do. I
Hmm.
can look what I can do. I can get this. I have connections. I can get this booze.
Okay.
Whereas others maybe weren't, or you knew where someone would serve you alcohol. It didn't matter as long as you're tall enough to sit at the stool at the bar that served you. You get the, but it so it wasn't really a problem as far as, but it was, like I said, a slippery slope because
Hmm.
you don't see it coming when you're really young.
Okay.
You know, you I never realized that alcohol was a problem at a young age because there were other things that maybe were more so.
Hmm.
Like you think alcohol might be a really neat way to maybe help you get a girl, and other things like that.
Yeah. So, what did that look like kind of go into adult life?
Well, later in adult life, as I became in the lumber industry and businessman, alcohol became, just part of the culture. You
Mm.
go to business meetings, you go to lunches, you go to
Hmm.
conferences and conventions and everything, and you drink. And uh, then part of the time through those years, I've noticed that there's the convention party over, the dinner's over, and then there was back at the bar in a hotel somewhere, and it would quite often be the same kind of people there, same familiar faces. And you
Yeah.
would even, I remember one guy saying to me, we're over in Victoria, and he says, I quit drinking. And I'm sitting there and he's having a beer with me. And he's telling me he quit drinking. No, I quit drinking hard stuff. Because for him, he's lying to himself about, he figured hard stuff was the only thing that was the problem. But, you can drink anything
Yeah.
and keep.
What made you start to feel like it might be a problem, not just normal life? Because it sounds like the work
Yeah.
life you had and everything was pretty
Well,
typical.
if I would drink quite a bit, like a lot during the week, and I make sure there was at least one night a week I'd go with my buddies to the bar. And
Mm.
in married life, like I'm not this is now, I got married with 4 kids and Jan's home with the kids, and I'm out on a Thursday night, and this is just normal Thursday night. It's guys' night out at the bar, and hockey on Tuesday and maybe Sunday, and then you're drinking after that, and you're drinking. So you end up drinking. I was definitely drinking every day,
Hmm.
and I couldn't sleep a lot of nights. So I would be drinking. I'd get up in the middle of the night and I'd have some drinks in the middle of the night to try to get back to sleep. And I started hiding those bottles from Jan so she wouldn't know how much I'd been drinking in the middle of the night. Just replace that bottle of apricot brandy with a new one, just sneak it in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then if she would mention something to me, one time she mentioned, that I can distinctly remember when she's saying like she wasn't happy with how much I was drinking. I mean, there were lots of times, but I mean, one time in particular, and I was thinking, I don't need you to tell me this. And so you start having these thoughts that becomes, I don't need you to be telling me this, that I don't need you, because that's how I can get so you won't tell me these things.
Wow.
At time prior to that, I mentioned to you a guy I used to play hockey with who had a really problem with drugs and alcohol addiction to that, and he had said to me when he had gone to an AA meeting that someone there had told him that, you're an alcoholic when strangers become like family and family become like strangers. And those were the thoughts that were starting to go through my head, and I was thinking, this is a time to try to quit, so
yeah,
you think you can do anything in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe as a young people, you start smoking because you think, I'm not going to get cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Think you can drink because it's not going to affect your life.
Mm-hmm.
But you realize then that, this is affecting my life and I got to quit. And then you realize it's not so easy. You try to quit, you might quit for a few months, and then you realize that, it's not possible. It's not as easy as it seems just to quit.
Yeah. What did your trying look like for you?
Well, I quit one time for about 3.5 months, and it was really hard. And I had tried other things. I said, okay, I won't have a drink alone. And for me, that's a big part of it too, was because I would drink in the middle of the night. So I said, I'm not going to drink alone. I won't have this come home from work and have a beer, come home from work, have a couple beers, cut the lawn, have a couple beers. I just won't do that. So then you end up finding excuses to go walk over a couple blocks to somebody and have a beer with him.
Okay.
So, you make up excuses and lie to yourself. First, you don't have a problem.
Yeah.
Then you think, okay, I'll cut it out. But really, the only way is to not pick up the first drink.
And when did you actually see real change happen?
When I actually quit drinking?
Yeah.
Well, I quit drinking in 2000 when I was going to go. Actually, my son was going to go. My older son was going to go on a Mexico mission trip to Mexicali, like the one we just did.
Yeah.
And from my experience with Mexico prior to that, it had not anything to do with Christianity. There was no mission trips to Mexico. It was a party trip to Mexico kind of thing. So I thought, Mexico is not somewhere where I want to see my young teenage son go to. So I thought, I can drive and I can swing a hammer. So I could go on this trip and be of value there. And so after hockey the Thursday before we left at a hockey game, I thought, okay, have this drink with the boys and then we're off on this trip. And, part of the thing it said, you can't have alcohol in the camp. And I thought, okay, well, this is only for a week. And actually on the drive down through the States, I was thinking, I really need a drink. And I don't think that we didn't talk about this before, but we got down to where we were staying the first night, and I went for a walk thinking, okay, because every time, you're driving all the way to Mexico, you drive through the United States. It's not like Canada when you go to a gas station, they're selling beer at every gas station, so you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
But the only thing I could find was beer that night, so I didn't bother buying a bottle to hide in my camp with me, Otherwise, it's quite possible that would have been in Redding, California. I would have got something like that to take into camp. But then again, stopped at that. It was really strange. The guy there was from the corner store was actually from Surrey.
That
Yeah,
is insane.
Reading.
In
So
Redding, California.
yeah, I think it was from Surrey. There's
Wow.
in the corner gas station. I mean, the corner grocery store.
Yeah.
And then as we're driving down, but God kind of had another little whisper to me there about the drinking. We got to Ramona, California, and a bunch of us. And I remember that place because we were driving, three vans kind of thing. And the first we pulled up to this gas station. It was just backed up so far that rather than staying like a convoy like we usually do, one van went there and two of us went down the street to a Texaco. And the guy at the Texaco station there starts talking to myself and the other driver, and he just starts talking. He says, without the grace of God, I wouldn't be here. I haven't had a drink for 100 days today. He's just like, dude, why are you telling us this? Like it's just like, I don't know you at all. And you just start talking about it. It's like, I think we have these burning bush experiences in life, but they're not necessarily this big flame on thing. They're God's whispering to us. So there was a few of these little God incidences like that on that trip. And then we got to camp and we were singing a song there, and one of the worship songs was, over the mountains and seas, I can't even remember all the words now, but it was, I will always sing of when your love came down. And I couldn't sing. I was just like, I couldn't say a word. I couldn't do anything. Just like tears coming out of my eyes, just flowing down rivers. And it was just like, like I was speechless, and God really touched me then. And he took that from me and came back. And, people were praying for me. And I went to my first men's retreat with a group from another church. And guy there was, during a break, I walked outside and the guy was talking to me, and he says, that he's a reformed alcoholic, and he's just said, it was kind of like the sins of our fathers. And he says, and it's just like, I had just finished reading this, and I didn't tell you I'm struggling with alcohol. And he just starts talking to me about this, and I just finished reading that passage like 5 minutes earlier, and he starts talking to me about this. And it's like, okay, God, like keeps knocking on me and saying, okay. And so that was like within a week from when I got back from Mexico.
Wow, that's incredible.
And it was just, and so now, praise be to God, it's been 20 years. Last month that I have not had a drink.
That's incredible.
So,
what was that like walking through that change with your wife and family?
Well, my kids were pretty young 20 years ago. So, I wanted to show them first what it was like. That I don't think, they didn't really know what how much of myself I wasn't necessarily giving them in their lives. I don't think they really knew that. But I made an effort of showing them, like I had a really stocked liquor cabinet, and I took a lot of that stuff and just poured it down the drain with them, seeing this. I wanted them to see that this didn't, and they do, the older two remember that. Because it was a very visual thing, seeing, top come off a bottle of booze and down.
You kind of mentioned Jan being a wife that seemed to be very loving and caring and chose to be honest with you, which I'm sure wasn't fun.
Yeah. I think for her, she was worried for me, obviously, because of the odd incident. I would say, like, the words I use, it was a functioning alcoholic. There are people that totally ruins their life. They have no chance unless they can quit, and it hits them fast and hard. Whereas I was able to carry on as would seem like a normal life to everybody. Wife and 4 kids, and got a really good job, and making a good career, and it seemed like a good life. But every now and then, when Jan would see me at my worst, then it's not something for her, but she was more worried for me, I think, because at that point, she knows that it's a hereditary thing and it's an addictive personality that I have.
Hmm.
So
And being like such a kind of lifestyle thing with sounds like the friends that most of the friendships you'd had with the hockey team and with those
yeah.
that you worked with and everything, that this was kind of a key piece of that. What was it like changing, I guess, some of your, I'm
Well, some of the
guessing.
work things was, there's some people at work that I would go out for lunch, 3 or 4 times a week with, and part of that would be involved, going somewhere where we could have a couple of beers at lunch, right? And
Yeah.
and I talk about lying to yourselves, and I would say to people, oh yeah, well we had 1 or 2 beers, but whenever I'd say I'd had 1 or 2 beers, really you had 3 or 4 beers. If you said to
Mm.
somebody 3 or 4 beers, really it was 5 or 6, so you after a while you start believing your own lies on those kind of things. But I came back. I quit my hockey team that I was playing with, and that's actually a humorous story too. In that I when I was in Mexicali, I talked it over first with our interpreters what I wanted to do, and I said I'm going to have to make some changes with the people that I hang around with, including my hockey team. Hockey team I was involved with was called the Wasted Knights. That's who I played for. And really, it was like they used like knights in shining armor. Their jersey had a crest, but it had like a beer and a cigar and a woman on the crest. Was divided up, that kind of thing. So definitely, and the motto was, and they had business cards. Even the motto said, "The best part of a day is a wasted night."
Mm.
And we lived that pretty good when we played hockey.
Yeah.
So I had to get off that team. So I quit the team, and this is like near the end of the season. So I'm just playing pickup black against white kind of thing with some guys. And I was a goaltender, and as a goaltender, there's always a demand for goalies. So, and this is where God's humor, really my sense of humor, God played this on for me. Perfect. This is like, again, about 2 weeks after I get back, come in the dressing room and starting to take my gear off, got my jersey off, and someone comes in the dressing room, hey, our goalie didn't show up. Goalie, can you play another game? I said, yeah, okay. So I just grabbed my clothes, still had all my gear on. So went into their dressing room. They threw me a jersey. I didn't even look what it was. They pulled it on, and then I look across at them, and it's Cup of Joe Java was sponsoring the team. So I went from the Wasted Nights to a hockey team that was sponsored by a coffee company. And I thought, okay, God, you got me here.
God
This is
had your
really,
back there for sure.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other people liked, there were friends that you think are friends, and then they said they liked the old Doug better,
Mhm.
than who I was now. So, you realize who your friends are. Yeah,
Yeah. I can imagine that'd be hard giving up some of
yeah.
those friendships.
Hmm.
And I hadn't heard you mention before, just like kind of, it sounds like you made a bit of a game plan in Mexico, knowing that this was a change you were making. You talked through with the translators some of the changes you were going to make.
Well, it seemed like in the past when I had tried to quit drinking and I had to be, make these excuses to be with someone else I could drink, that I don't know whether I talked about that or not yet, but
A little bit that you just
yeah.
like,
So
definitely a theme of lying to yourself a little bit and
yeah, so you make these
like,
excuses to go drink with someone else so you don't drink alone. So
mm,
I drink in the middle of the night alone, just use it as a sleeping aid, But
mm,
so I thought, in the hockey team, after hockey, I know I was going to have way too many, that I had to change that. But it was more like these thoughts are just, it seems so logical now. When I was in that point, it seems so logical to do this,
mm,
but it wasn't before. And it was like I said to you one time there earlier, I had talked about, like as a teenager, I used to juggle and ride a unicycle, but you could pick up 3 balls and you could juggle them, and you could do that for a long time. But maybe you even try to do the fourth one, and you can
mm,
do that, and eventually you're going to drop those balls. So it's way easier not to pick them up,
mm,
not to have that first drink.
mm.
So you can't have one, and that's maybe part of my personality too. I know some people were able to have a drink and then stop drinking and
Yeah.
sit there and drink, but that would be way too hard. So I made
Hmm.
the plan not to have that first drink.
Yeah, that can definitely take some humility. I know, even like my own life experience, just part of life is you're going to be in context where everyone is having a drink and they expect you to have a drink. And if for whatever reason you're choosing not to,
Mm-hmm.
it's often treated as weakness
Well, I
or,
think for youth, I think their weakness is it's the peer pressure that happens. You're always like with a cigarette. For me, when it was that age, I was having a cigarette. Why don't you
Mhm.
smoke? So yeah, eventually you might give it. You might hold out for a couple of years, but you probably end up smoking. Oh, I decided to do this. So the same thing will happen with alcohol.
Mhm.
Whether you start drinking on a regular basis at 16, or whether you start when you're 19, 20, when you can actually legally get in the bar and, depending where you're living. Um, and yeah, after that, okay, you're sucked in, you're part of this culture now.
Yeah, and like having heard a lot of different people's stories of different types of addiction playing out in their lives. Some people they have like a catastrophic moment and something that pushes them into addiction. But you've kind of shared that for you, you've felt that it's more of an addictive personality and a trait that you've seen a pattern of a bit in your family. And so I guess there's some self awareness there. But going, this is just my personality. How do you try to live with that well and honor God with that now?
Yeah, I said it was, like it is for me hereditary going back on both sides of my family. I
Hmm.
said there's been problems going way back. What I talked about with you earlier, I could have gone back even further, generations
Hmm.
before that. But knowing that, yeah, that is a good thing to know that, but you can't always do much about it, right? If you,
Hmm.
if you say,
Hmm.
okay, 50% of my family have had heart problems,
Hmm.
so you know it, but maybe you
Hmm.
can't do anything about it. But
Hmm.
so I really think God took that from me, but whether He made me aware of it at that point or whether I became more aware of it later, I don't know. But how I can honor God with it now is doing things like this. I can talk to you about this.
Hmm.
I can help out at the community kitchen because I feel a connection in some ways to people that attend there that might have alcohol problems. And I know people in my family who might have had, attending similar
Hmm.
things in the past because, of their addiction issues. So they would have to go to like Union Gospel as well. So for me, I can honor God that way. And because really, when God touched me in Mexico back in 2000, I had been going through the motions as a Christian. I had been, attending church because that's what you should do. You got
Hmm.
a young family now, let's go find a church. But I wasn't really a Christian. God hadn't touched me. I didn't have a relationship with God.
Hmm.
I had gone, raised as a Catholic. So we did confirmation when we were 12, grade 7, like it's, which is confirmation is the same as um, profession of faith, basically.
Okay.
But profession of faith, you do it when you're ready.
Hmm.
Confirmation when you're Catholic, everyone gets done. You just done. Okay, we're
Okay.
done.
Yeah.
But you do pick. And another ironic thing here is you pick a name of a saint. So you add that to your names. It's not on your paperwork, but it's there. So I
Hmm.
took the name of Sebastian. So I did Saint Sebastian. Ironic it is. It's the most Spanish sounding name of all, Sebastian. So since then, I was sort of like became a friend of mine says, you were born, because for me, I became a born again Christian in 2000 in Mexico, in Mexicali. So born again Christian, and people I know, some of them that call you, yeah, and you're born again Mexican. It was in Mexicali. And the name that I have is Sebastian. So, which is as Spanish as you can get. So since then, I have continued to honor God, I guess, and part of it is these ongoing mission trips.
Yeah.
I'm down now, continue to go since 2000, virtually every year, except for when there was an H1N1. And this year we had to cancel
Hmm.
because COVID-19. But I've been feeling blessed every year getting to go at least once to Mexico. Almost.
Yeah, that's what I just want to throw in there that stood out to me and was a real blessing last year going to Mexico, having you come with us to Mexico with our youth group, is that God seems to have really just blessed you with a humble desire to serve and care for people and practically support God's work. There's a lot of people that want something glamorous or they want to do something that makes the church look cool. And I've just seen both the way that you serve at the community kitchen and just show up to care about people that our city ignores or going to Mexico. You always have my back. And it was pretty funny because I'm like, that was my second time taking a group to Mexico. It was probably your 20th time or more going with a
I
group
think
to
that was
Mexico.
my 18th trip. So
18th trip to
yeah,
Mexico with a large group, and just the humility of serving, like you served me and empowered me to be a leader that I don't know, just that's something that I think that we need to look to role models of that in the church. And when I'm a young leader, you're a bit more
yeah,
of a senior leader.
yeah,
Um,
senior leader.
yeah, that just empowered me to grow so much in a way that meant so much. Yeah,
Great. That's
so
great.
just a sidetrack. I wanted to make sure that got in there because I think that's something that needs to be said.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just jumping back, thinking about here, if you have, what kind of questions would you hope that youth would be asking in their own life as they start to see their friend group or maybe even the family context that drugs or alcohol, different potentially addictive things are coming into their life? What questions would you hope they'd be asking themselves, asking God, processing as they make decisions around that?
Yeah. Well, say you can lie to yourself, like I said, you can fool yourself and you think this is not going to affect your life. But I think maybe what you got to ask yourself is this, is by taking these drugs or gambling or alcohol, whatever this addictive thing is this really what God wants for you in your life? Is this really what you want in your life? Is it to become, I know the U.S. thing, the Army there, whatever, or the Marines or something like, be all you can be.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that you can be all you can be if you get hooked on whatever that is, whatever that addictive thing is.
Hmm.
It's going to affect you, but it'll affect more than you, and the consequences of something you do today is going to affect you much further down the road, especially depending on how your chemical makeup is too. With alcohol, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the best thing that can happen to someone is have a hangover. Really, you may not drink so much the next day, but if you've got, depending on your, like,
Mm-hmm.
it would be seldom, I could drink, but seldom you would get a hangover. And that's the worst thing going. So there's no logical consequences.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. But then, like,
so
you definitely shared that, like, your kids didn't know what they're missing out on of you being a father in their life
yeah,
until
I don't think I
what?
was the best. I don't think I was the best father. I was a terrible father, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I could have been a better father if I
Yeah.
didn't drink like that. I think I could
Hmm.
have been a better business owner if I didn't have a drinking problem.
Hmm.
Could have been a better husband if I didn't drink. So it's like polluting, like what a great river out there, and you
Yeah.
can be swimming in it. But if you start polluting it too much, it's not. I'm not going in there.
Hmm. And how about, like, you've walked beside a lot of other people struggling with addiction in their life and seen that. If you you were in high school and you had a friend who was, you could see that this was starting to become, that something was starting to become an addiction in their life, how it, what practically can someone do to speak into that well and be a good friend to them?
Yeah, I don't necessarily have that answer for as a young adult
Yeah.
because, or a teenager,
Hmm.
because I was not that guy. I would have been needing someone to speak into my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as an adult now who's gone through that and had, you know, people in my family in the past going through that, it's trying to look ahead into the future and saying, am I going to be the best father I can be, or the best, you know, have the best relationship with that girl
Mm-hmm.
if I'm drinking or smoking or
Mm-hmm.
doing drugs or whatever it is, you know. So you could maybe talk to your friends about that and saying, like this is affecting our friendship here.
Mm-hmm.
It might be more like at that stage, just as how it's
Hmm.
affecting the two of you, not so much the big picture of how it's going to affect your life 20, 30 years down the road, because that's really hard to see. As a young teenager, I don't think I could think beyond a week. A week might have been hard, I
Yeah.
think about day to day and that, but
Hmm.
so how's it affecting you as friends?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, we're kind of getting close to the end of this, but is there anything that you'd like to add, something that maybe we didn't get into that you'd hope to get into or mention?
Well, I haven't helped a ton of people or talked to a ton of people. I've talked to a few people about this, and
Hmm.
you know, I I didn't join AA because I didn't like it. Some people were stuck there in a crutch. I felt for some people.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, I know real close that they need to go to those almost daily.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on how, if they're struggling with this on their own, don't struggle with it on your own. Go to something like AA or speak to someone like me. I mean, I feel like I'm in AA. You get what they call a sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
someone you can talk to. Well, I'm there. I could be your sponsor as a young adult if you're, or teen that you want to talk about this, and you know, I guess with social distance talk.
Yeah. Skype calls work still,
They do. They do.
and yeah, a theme of every story I've heard of addiction and God working in that is a critical part is we start to live in a place where we lie about it, and we lie to others, we lie to ourselves, and I believe Satan works through that. And part of God's process of freedom is shedding light and bringing truth. And like you talked about how I think some of your conversations with the translators when you were in Mexico was shedding light on that. Your wife, I think God spoke through her a bit to shed light on that to some
Oh,
extent.
God blessed me with her at a young age, and yeah, definitely saved me.
Yeah.
Saved me from going much further that way than maybe this way, and you know, led me to the point where I could be saved.
Yeah. So I'd encourage anybody listening to this, if you're feeling that maybe there's something in your life that is taking you away from God's best for your life. Maybe you're doing okay, maybe you're doing well, but you know that there's something that's controlling your life that means that you're not doing what God, being the best friend, the best whatever. Open up with somebody. And yeah, Doug is an awesome guy. I would definitely trust him to open up with him, or honestly, opening up with anybody is going to help. And finding
Exactly.
somebody that can walk beside you, point you in the right direction is so valuable and part of God's gift of community and the church to each other.
Yeah, we're meant to be a community, and it's tougher in times like this to be a community, but there's still ways to reach out to somebody, or just sometimes it's just so you can talk to someone about it. They
Mm-hmm.
may not necessarily have great words of wisdom, but if you're starting to talk about it for yourself, then you're starting to come to the point where you know that, wait a minute, maybe this is an issue.
Mm, that's so good. Is there anything else that you'd like to add in?
No, I think we've really covered it all, I think.
Man, well, thank you so much for
Hey, my pleasure.
giving us
Definitely.
your time and sharing your story in such a real, honest way. Um, yeah, it's been inspiring to me, and really hope that it'll be helpful to others in our church community and our youth group that are processing their lives and what God may be calling them to step up in, um, seek freedom.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for serving our church.
Well, thank you as well for serving the church and this youth. That's a tough position to be
Uh,
in.
It's been
So,
my pleasure. Yeah, I love being in that role and being able to be there for people and walk through it.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, be safe out there.
sounds good. All right. Talk to everybody later.
Take care.